life happens. What about divorce? What about death? It may be impossible for your farming child to keep that farm intact after your death if all that's done is the simple "I love you" will. Unfortunately, what we see in this industry is the death of the patriarch and matriarch is often the beginning of the death of the farm. And that's what we want to prevent. So then sometimes people say, well, it doesn't matter. My wills control everything. Really? Is that really how it goes? Let's look at that.
Welcome to Compeer's Ag Edge, brought to you by Compeer Financial. In each episode, we break down complex agricultural economics, policy dynamics, and farm business topics into conversations that make sense for your operation. We're here to help you stay informed and confident about the trends and decisions affecting your agricultural business.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today for this presentation. My name is Lisa Quist. I come to you from Nationwide. We have a program called Land is Your Legacy, which is a program that Nationwide has put together to help farmers and ranchers transition their operations from the current owner generation to the incoming generation. So thank you so much. I come to you from Central Iowa. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a CPA. I do not give legal or tax advice. Just a little bit about me so you know kind of who I am and how I came to be here. I actually grew up on a hobby farm in rural Minnesota. It wasn't my dad's job. We never earned income from it. It was just something that he did for fun. So every summer we had something different on our farm. I remember sheep, pigs, goats, turkeys. I raised rabbits for 4-H, for our county 4-H. Just a very typical small hobby farm. We had a huge garden, all those kinds of things. When I was 13, my dad changed jobs and took us from this rural hobby farm in Minnesota to a suburb of the Twin Cities. My parents actually enrolled me in a private high school in downtown St. Paul. So I went from this very rural country life, running barefoot with the animals all summer long, to living in a suburb of Minneapolis, St. Paul. I actually took my driver's test on the streets of downtown St. Paul. So pretty big difference between where I started and where I ended up. And I loved it. I loved city life. I loved everything about it. By the time I was a senior in high school, I had made the decision that I was going to grow up, move to New York City, go to college, get my broadcast journalism degree, and become the next Katie Couric. That was what I knew I was going to do when I was 17, 18 years old. Well, sometimes we make plans and God laughs, right? So I went to college and met this guy the first day on campus. There is no chance I was moving him to New York City. He was the 7th generation to run his family's farm. We got married and moved back to the family farm. What I'm talking about, even though you may be generation 5, 6, or 7 on your operation, what I'm talking about when I say generation 1 is you are the current owner of the majority of the assets on your operation. So again, you may be generation 4, 5, 6, but for this presentation, if you own the majority of the assets, you would be generation 1. Then generation 2 will come behind them. Sometimes you own some assets, but not the majority. And then if your operation is blessed enough to have 3 generations, that 3rd generation, of course, comes after that. So if you've got 3, it's typically grandma, grandpa, mom, dad, and then the kids. For this presentation, we were generation 2. So we were farming with his dad. Like I said, we were the 7th generation to run that family land. And my New York City dreams went up in smoke, right? He has 9 brothers and sisters. I was married to the one who everybody told me we knew he was going to be the farmer from the time he could walk and talk. So there's no way I'm moving this farmer to New York City. So there goes the end of my New York City dreams. If you had told me when I was in high school that I was going to grow up and marry a farmer and eventually learn how to drive combine and field cultivator and all of those things, I would have fallen off my chair laughing. There's no way I thought that was going to be possible. But I loved it. I absolutely loved the country life and being part of the farm, the family farm. Unfortunately, there was not a transition plan in place for our operation. And what we're here to talk about is the difference between an estate plan and a transition plan. So there was an estate plan, but there was no transition plan. And when the planning is not done correctly, you end up here. My family's auction took place in December of 2010. Now, there has not been a death in the family. My father-in-law is still living. But my husband and I looked at the situation and understood that it was not in our financial best interest to stay in this operation where there's no effective planning taking place, that financially it just was not a good decision for us to continue when there was no guarantee of us being able to take over the operation someday. So we made the heartbreaking decision to sell out 2 of our 4 kids, watching everything they knew get sold to the highest bidder that day. So thank you for being here today, taking this seriously, understanding how important this conversation is. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about why is Nationwide doing this? Probably the most common question I get asked is, why does Nationwide care? Why has Nationwide built a whole program around transition planning? So we'll talk about that. And then we're going to do a case study between a typical estate plan and a transition plan and kind of what the difference is and what we're looking for. And then we'll summarize what we've talked about. So Nationwide and Compeer have a partnership. We are one of the partners that Compeer uses when they have clients that are looking to do transition planning work with their families. So we really appreciate that partnership with Compeer and the Farm Credit System. So we're just going to talk a little bit about why Nationwide is doing this. So one thing most people don't know is that Nationwide is a company that was started by farmers and continues to be run by farmers today. We were started in 1926 with a loan from the Ohio Farm Bureau as a way for people who lived in the country to get better auto insurance rates than the people who lived in the larger cities. By 1955, we had grown so large that the Insurance Commission told us we had to split into 2 companies. And so that's where the name Nationwide came from. In 1982, we acquired Farmland Insurance, which made us the largest insurer on the property and casualty side for farms and ranches in the United States. And we've held that distinction consecutively since 1982. So since our inception in 1926, over half of our board members and the chairman of our board have always been active farmers. Right now, it's 9 out of 16 are active farmers, and there's a couple that are really involved in agriculture. It's so important to us as Nationwide that we keep agriculture at the heart of what we're doing, that it is a part of our board makeup to ensure that the majority vote is always with agriculture. In 2010, one of our farming board members, a large farmer in Pennsylvania, was farming with his brother, and unfortunately his brother was killed in a farming accident. He came back to our next board meeting and he said, here I am. I sit on the board of the largest insurer for property and casualty for farms and ranches in the United States. If you had asked me 6 months ago if I had a transition plan in place, I would have told you that I did. We had gone to the attorney. We had written our wills. We had our estate plan done. I didn't know there was a difference. And now that my brother has passed away, our farm is in a disaster. We're not sure we're going to make it through this financially. And if I'm in this situation, we must have customers in this situation. Nationwide, we have to do something. So it was voted on that day that we would come up with a plan. And it was also voted on that day that this is something Nationwide would do as part of our corporate give back to rural America and our investment in agriculture, because agriculture is so important to us. So this is actually something that we do at no cost or obligation to your farms and your families. If you're interested in working with us, fantastic. This is just work we know is really important to do, and we want to make sure that as many people as possible are able to get the work done. So that's a little bit about why we're doing it. Now, you guys are all farmers yourself. You know these statistics. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. But the one I really like to focus on here is that it's estimated by the USDA that about 1/3 of family farms have a transition plan in place. Personally, I think that number is over-exaggerated. I think because of the misunderstanding between an estate plan and a transition plan, I think farmers are answering that question that, yes, I have a transition plan done, when maybe in reality what they actually have is an estate plan. Again, that's what we're here to talk about today. So if I had a guess, and this is just my personal opinion, I would say that that number is probably closer to 6, maybe 10% actually have a full transition plan in place, not just an estate plan. So let's talk about what the difference is today. So we're going to start, again, I told you we're going to go through a case study. So first we're going to talk about a typical estate plan and what happens. So this is our case study, Bill and Sue, very typical operation. They're 3rd generation. They have 3 adult children, David, John, and Lucy, and John is the only one who currently farms. Bill and Sue go to their attorney. They know it's important to do this work. So they go to their attorney and they draft what I call a typical I love you will. They love their children equally, so they're going to divide their assets equally among their children. So what happens when you sign a typical I love you will is when the first person dies, we're going to say statistically Bill's going to die first. In a statistical world, the men die first. Sorry, men who are here, but it's just true. So Bill dies first. Everything automatically transitions to Sue. When Sue passes away, all the assets get divided equally among their 3 children. If one of the children would happen to predecease the parents, then if there's grandchildren, that third of the estate would be divided equally among the grandchildren. If there's no grandchildren, then the estate gets divided in 2 between the remaining 2 living children. Make sense? Typical I love you will, and that's how it works. So what happens to the farm when you've got one farming child and that's how your will is set up? Well, at that point, everything gets divided into thirds. So Bill and Sue have now passed away. Everything gets divided equally. So what some people misunderstand is it doesn't just neatly compartmentalize and say, well, David gets this 80 and John gets this 80 and Lucy gets this 80. What it does is it takes every single acre and divides each individual acre into thirds. So everything is owned in equal shares. Every piece of equipment is owned in thirds. Any owner can force a sale or a partition action at any time, and the other 2 owners don't have anything to say about it. So they all become equal owners, equal managers, and an equal voice. Well, when that's your situation, who is ultimately going to be making the decision? So you've got 3 children. They all have different personalities, which is normal, and they all have different opinions. So in our case study, Lucy says, I want to start an organic yak farm. John just wants to farm, right? And David, he's kind of the financier of the group. He understands that if you sell the farmland to a developer, you can make a lot of money. So he just wants to sell to a developer so that they can make that income and move forward that way. So you've got 3 different managers, you've got 3 different opinions, and the farming son is only one voice. So if the other 2 children decide they want to do something else with it, they can force the farming son to do maybe what he doesn't want to do. He just wants to keep farming. So for those of you on the call who are generation 1, which as we saw at the beginning is the majority of you, would you want to farm with your siblings and have them have an equal voice in what you're doing? Do your off-farm kids have the knowledge necessary to make the management decisions that need to be made on the farm every year? So as an example, as equal managers, equal owners, they have the right to see the farm books at the end of the year. Well, if they're off-farm kids, maybe they don't understand the nuances of farming. And let's take chemicals as an example. Do your off-farm kids understand when they look at the books? Chemicals is something that goes all over the map, right? They go up, they go down. Not exactly sure where they are right this minute. I just know that they vary a lot. So if your off-farm kids look at the books and they realize in X year, we spent $100,000 on chemicals, and in the next year, we spent $200,000 on chemicals. Well, let's go back to whatever we were doing the year we spent $100,000. Well, is that the way it works? Of course not. Those of us who are on the farm understand we don't set those prices, or there's not some decision we're making that's going to give us that different price. It's set and we have nothing to say about it. So do your off-farm kids have the knowledge necessary to make those decisions? Or are they going to force decisions that are not in the best interest of that operation? So what about the income? Now, we're talking profit, but at the end of the year, when this is the way your will is set up, all of the profit for that operation gets divided in thirds. So could you, generation 1, have built your farm to where it is today if at the end of every single year you had to take whatever was your profit and divide it equally among your siblings? Most farms take their profit and reinvest it back in the operation. Maybe you want to diversify. Maybe you want to increase land or increase your herd size. What about updating things, tiling, buildings, modernizing your equipment line? What about repairs? Those certainly take a price. Could you run your farm today if you only got to retain 1/3 of your profits at the end of every single year? So I always like to kind of flip this on its head, and I do know this is not possible, okay? But what if Bill and Sue could write their wills in such a way that at the end of every single year, David and Lucy had to split their profits with John? I know you can't do that, right? It's a silly example, but that wouldn't really fly, would it? So why should John have to split all of his profit? He's the one doing all the work. He's the one that's working on the farm every single day, often sacrificing a lot to be on that farm just because of the lifestyle it is. It's a fantastic lifestyle. I love the lifestyle, but there's a lot that you sacrifice when you're farming, especially during the busy seasons. So keep that in mind. So life happens. Eventually, over time, there are frequently things that come up that cause a division. Your kids may get along great, and that's awesome. And we'll often have people in that generation one tell us why our kids would never do that. Well, maybe, but maybe not. Maybe when they see all the zeros on the page, they're going to decide maybe we want to buy that cabin up north, or we need to pay for our kids to go to college, or we need to remodel our house, or what about medical expenses? So just because you feel like your kids would never do that to the farming child, just know that there are stories after stories after stories of people who kind of go crazy when there's a whole bunch of zeros on the end of the balance sheet. And keep that in mind. And remember, everybody has to get along, even the spouses, right? So the spouses don't have that equal vote, but they're certainly there whispering in the ears of their spouses. So keep that in mind. And life happens. What about divorce? What about death? It may be impossible for your farming child to keep that farm intact after your death if all that's done is the simple "I love you" will. Unfortunately, what we see in this industry is the death of the patriarch and matriarch is often the beginning of the death of the farm. And that's what we want to prevent. So then sometimes people say, well, it doesn't matter. My wills control everything. Really? Is that really how it goes? Let's look at that. So one thing people often don't understand is that beneficiary designations trump everything else, even your will. And it is very hard to contest that. So think about anything you have that has beneficiary designation, a life insurance policy, IRA, 401k, annuities, anything where you've listed a beneficiary. Most of us go and we list our spouse 100%, and then our contingent beneficiaries are our children equally, right? Well, in our situation, when Bill and Sue were setting up their accounts with beneficiaries, Lucy was still a minor. You don't ever want to leave a beneficiary as a minor. You can ask more questions about that later if you have them, but you don't ever want a minor as a beneficiary. Bill and Sue knew that, so they put down David and John, assuming that if something happened to them, David and John would do the right thing for their minor sister. Well, by the time David and John actually pass away, Lucy's an adult. David and John are, off, married, doing their own thing. Lucy is an adult as well. So they don't have to. You would hope that they would do the right thing. But again, it's not a nice move to not give your sibling their portion, but it's not legally required for them to do that. So you'd hope they would do the right thing, but there's no guarantees. And probably everybody on this call can give a story where it was not handled the way mom and dad probably intended it to be. We hear stories in the life insurance industry all of the time of people who got divorced and remarried, never changed the beneficiary, and the first wife gets that life insurance proceeds. Second wife, there's nothing she can do about it. It doesn't matter if they were married for 20 years. If that life insurance beneficiary is still wife number one is getting those proceeds. So how about ownership of things? So in our case study, Bill has passed away. Sue is getting older. She needs help with her finances. Well, David is busy. He's married, has a couple kids. He's an entrepreneur. He's busy doing everything. John's farming. We all know that's busy. And Lucy lives in town really close to mom. So it's just really easy for Sue to take Lucy with her to the bank. And she puts her on her accounts at the bank as joint with rights of survivorship. It makes it so easy to do the banking because now Lucy can make deposits, make withdrawals, check balances, transfer balances. It's just easy to have Lucy on there. Well, if that's how the account is set up, then eventually when Sue passes away, all of those accounts go to Lucy. David and John are now excluded. Once again, we would hope that Lucy would do the right thing, but she's not required to. She's not legally obligated to do that. How about contracts? What if you've taken out a new loan on a piece of ground? If you pass away, that loan doesn't go away. Somebody has to pay it. Grain contracts, futures contracts, buy-sell agreements, long-term leases, all of those things stand even after you have passed away. So in our situation, David, remember he's the financier, David is living in one of the extra houses. Like people who don't live in the country don't understand the concept of extra houses, but I'm pretty sure everybody on this call knows what I'm talking about. You buy a piece of land and it comes with a house. So David's living in one of those extra houses. He signs a contract with Bill before Bill passes away. He signed it 15 years ago, this contract. And the contract says that David can buy the home and the surrounding 80 acres at a 30% discount with the price set 15 years ago. What's happened to land prices in the last 15 years? They've gone through the roof, right? Like way through the roof. So now we fast forward. Bill has passed away. Sue has passed away. And David pulls out this contract and decides he's going to exercise this contract immediately. He never really got around to it. Mom and dad were pretty good landlords. Why in the world would he take on a mortgage when mom and dad are, kind of taking care of it for him? But now that Bill and Sue are gone, he pulls out the contract and exercises the contract. Still a legally binding contract. He's not doing anything illegal or immoral. I would say it's not very kind, and it's kind of a slimy move, but it's not illegal for him to do that. So David goes, remember, this price was set 15 years ago, plus at a 30% discount. So he is getting a smoking good deal on this land. And also remember, he's the one that wanted to sell it to developers. So he immediately turns around and sells that 80 acres to developers. He makes a really good profit, retains the house, just sells the land, makes a really good profit, and John has 80 acres less to farm. So keep in mind that those kinds of things will happen if you have a simple estate plan and not a full transition plan. A transition plan is more than just having your estate documents done. It's more than a will. It's more than a trust. So year after year, farmers and ranchers go to educational events like this. We did it every single year. We went to at least one, sometimes more than one, to learn about what we should do. This is not a lack of knowledge or information being available. So the University of Minnesota does a lot of these type of transition planning seminars, and they decided to do a survey a few years back. And they surveyed everybody who had ever attended one of their seminars on transition planning and said, now that you've attended this seminar, how much have you done towards getting your transition plan taken care of after getting the education you got at the seminar? 85% of the respondents have said they haven't done anything. So it's not for lack of knowledge. It's not for lack of understanding how important it is. But year after year, the majority of farmers are not implementing what they're learning at these events. So are you interested in being part of the 85% that doesn't get it done or the 15% that does? So where does your farm want to be in a year? Let's talk about what does it take to be successful with a transition plan. So any good business needs to have good management and be financially sound to be stable enough to pass to the next generation. But when you're talking about a farm, it's also really important. It's a family business. And so you need to have family harmony. So often the issues that surface after the patriarch and matriarch's death are because the heirs' expectations don't match what the actual plan is. Now, I'm not here to tell you one way or the other. If your goal, generation one, is to divide everything equally, totally fine. They are your assets for you to decide what you're going to do with them. So if your goal is we're just dividing this exactly equally, that's fine. That's your call. I'm not here to tell you that's right or wrong. It is your decision. But what I do ask you is if that's your decision, please, please, please communicate that to your on-farm child specifically. All of your children need to know what the plan is. Keeping it a secret is not a good way to go about it. That's typically when we start to see really big issues, is when nobody knows what that estate plan is or transition plan is. And if your plan is, our on-farm child has been here, they've helped us grow the business, they've worked hard, they've put in sweat equity, we're going to give them a discount or a bonus or whatever your structure is. Again, I'm not here to say what's right or wrong. That's your decision. But if that's what you're going to choose to do with your estate and transition plan, please communicate that to your off-farm children, whichever way you decide. They might not like it, but they are less likely to hold a grudge and be angry at you long-term while you're still living. Once you've passed away, they're not going to be mad at you. That feels disrespectful. You're gone. But they will be mad at their siblings. And that's when we see families tend to just tear apart and they never speak to each other again. So once you decide what that plan is going to look like for your operation, communicate it to your kids so there aren't surprises for that next generation. Because again, The most common issue we see when there is an issue is that the heirs' expectations don't match what the plan actually is. So to complete a transition plan, you need people, you need a plan, and you need the right tools. So let's talk about that. The people part of this requires a team. Please do not think you can do this on your own. You're going to have an attorney involved. There are always going to be legal documents that need to be drafted. Your accountant and CPA has to be at the table. Your loan officer at Compeer, your risk manager, maybe your crop insurance person, all of these people need to be part of this conversation. And at the center of that should be you and whoever your financial advisor is that's helping you do this work. Now, Nationwide has advisors all over Compeer's territory to help with this work. If that's what you choose to do, there are all kinds of people doing this work and doing it well. But if you choose to work with Nationwide, we have advisors all over your territory that are ready to come in and help you. They're going to sit at the middle of that table with you and make sure that everybody is communicating and talking and all the pieces are going to work together. So sometimes we'll do a review of somebody's plan that they already have completed. And we see it very, very frequently that the attorney does their part, which is focusing on the estate plan, which is what their training is. It's what they should be doing. And the CPA is doing their part, which is focusing on taxes and estate taxes and all of that, which is what they should be doing. And that's where their training and expertise is. But if the two don't talk to each other, the plan may not actually work. And we have seen many situations where what the attorney drafted does not go along with what the CPA drafted, and there's big conflict with it. So whoever you work with on this, whether it's someone from Nationwide or someone else, just make sure you've got that person at the middle who's willing to be your quarterback in this process and help you through the whole thing and bring all of the key people to the table. And the other thing I would ask you is make sure whoever you choose has that farming knowledge. There are people out there that can do business succession planning and they do a great job. But if they don't understand the nuances of farming, there may not be your best partner for this process. There are so many special things that go into transitioning a farm that's different than transitioning a traditional business. So whoever you work with, please make sure that they have that agriculture knowledge as well. And again, communication, such a huge part of it. It's not going to solve your problems. It's not going to change bad behavior, differences in opinion, strong personalities that are hard to get along with. But what it does do is it helps to define the issues, it validates assumptions, and it helps to minimize misunderstandings. Good communication is the foundation that a successful transition plan is built on, and it is the most important thing to get rock solid before you start moving forward. Our most successful operations that we work with are the ones that get the communication piece down. So let's talk about the pieces that go into a transition plan. So when you work with an advisor at Nationwide, these are the topics we're going to be talking with you about. The first one is succession planning. So to us, this is the soft side. It's the hopes, dreams, and goals. What decision are we making today that's in the best interest of this farm, gives it the best chance of success 20 or 30 years into the future? Again, kind of the soft side, the family dynamics, all of that kind of gets wrapped up into that piece. From there, we look at business planning. So business planning is looking, do you have a business entity set up? If so, is it still the best business entity for your operation? In some situations, maybe your business entity was set up 20, 30 or more years ago, and your operation has changed. We certainly know Washington has changed and changed their rules and regulations. And so maybe if it was set up quite some time ago, it might not still be in the best interest of your operation. If you don't have a business entity set up, we're going to look at giving you recommendations of what we think would be in your best interest. From there, we're going to go into risk management. Under risk management, we're looking at everything, anything that can be a risk to your operation, with the exception we don't cover crop insurance. That you can work with your Compeer insurance officer on that. We do not do anything with crop insurance. We don't look at it. We don't advise on it. But we're going to look at life insurance, long-term care insurance, disability insurance. We'll review your property and casualty if you want us to. But any of those things that could really derail your plan, we're going to take a peek at and look at. The next one we look at is financial independence. So this one is the touchy one with farmers, right? Because farmers don't retire, but eventually you do, that generation when you do start stepping away, you're not quite as involved in the day-to-day of that operation as you used to be. And maybe you want to travel more or spend more time with your grandkids or spend more time with your hobbies. In the financial planning world, we call it the go-go years. The years where you're still young enough to be really, really active is when you tend to spend the largest portion of your retirement accounts. It's just kind of a known fact out there. You have spent your whole life building this operation. You need to make sure that you have the standard of living that you deserve, but are not such a draw in the operation that it makes it hard for generation two to keep the business going and keep the lights on and the bills paid. So we're going to look at that. In that piece, my favorite part is we also look at mentorship and knowledge transfer. So we all know it's really important to transfer the assets, right? Everybody talks about that. Everybody knows that's important. But I think we're missing the boat on transferring the knowledge, transferring the management skills, transferring that information. If all of a sudden generation one doesn't walk through the door tomorrow morning, is generation two able to pick up and not miss a beat and keep going? Do they know what they need to know? Do they know who to call for different things? Do they know how to decide which seed goes in which field? Do they know how to decide when do we plant? When do we harvest? How do we make that decision? Or has dad, stereotypically dad, always just said, today's the day we go? So we need to make sure that we're really setting them up for success as best as possible. And that includes the knowledge transfer. When we get through those four, then we go to the estate planning piece. We like to say after you've gone through steps 1 through 4, you've earned the right to get to the estate planning piece. We bring in your local attorneys. Nationwide is not drafting legal documents. You're working with your local attorney for that. We're giving you the recommendations of what to do. You go to your local attorney, you draft the legal documents to make this all legally binding. If you work through our program and you never meet with the attorney, you are no better off than before you started talking to us, because you've got to do that implementation piece. You have to get those documents drafted. And I said earlier that this is something Nationwide does as a complimentary service, which is true. There is no cost to you. There is a cost for implementation. Your attorney is not going to work for free. Any of those recommendations may have a cost associated with them. There's no cost to get the plan from us. There is a cost for implementation, just so that we're clear on that. And then step number 6, reviews. These must be living, breathing documents that are reviewed and revised as your operation changes. Often we will see plans that were done 20, 30 or more years ago. They'll send them back through to us for review, and they need to be almost totally redone because things change, right? So what you wrote in your will 30 years ago is not necessarily what's going to be in your will today. When my husband and I redid our estate documents like a year ago, my oldest daughter liked to tease my youngest daughter. Yeah, mom and dad wrote you out of their will. No, we didn't. She just wasn't born yet, right? So things change. You have additional children, or, kids get married, kids are farming, kids leave farming. You diversify the operation. You've got to make these living, breathing documents that are reviewed. We recommend at least every 3 to 5 years. All right. That is what I have. Thank you all so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. May you have a calm, safe season. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Compeers Ag Edge. You can follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. For more agricultural finance insights and resources, visit compeer.com. That's COMPEER.com. Until next time.